and peace from God our Father and from our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. As I said at the welcome, we come today to the culmination of the sermon series, Mission Possible. And it's kind of bittersweet because I've enjoyed very much preparing this series of sermons, and it's exciting to know that because the mission belongs to God, the mission to save the world is possible. And today we come to the culmination of the series, and really the focus is kind of the culmination of everything. What is God's ultimate goal? And so we're going to talk about heaven, and we're going to talk about all that God has in store for us. But before we go to the end of all things, I'm going to take it the other direction. We're going to go the other direction to the beginning, to before the beginning, to before creation, when there was just God. And I want to ask you something. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why? Why would God do what He did? Why would God create? I mean, if God is the God we believe in, and if what we believe in about Him is true, that He knows the end of a thing before the beginning, then He knew that when He created, all the things that have happened would happen. He saw in advance the fall into sin. He saw before it happened what would happen with disease and sickness and death and war and pestilence. God saw before He ever spoke the first words of creation how we as human beings would be inhumane to each other. He even saw the evil perpetrated in His own name against the people in this world. So why? Why would God do what He did? I will tell you this, that if it had been me standing at the other side of creation, and I had the thought of creating the world and creating humanity, and I could see into the future and know everything that was going to happen, it wouldn't have. When I had the thought of humanity, I would have said, it's not worth it. And the idea of humanity creation would have been a passing fancy. And I'd be willing to bet that most of you feel the same way. So, I guess to start with, we need to thank God that we weren't God in the beginning. That still brings us back to the question, why? Why would God do what He did, knowing what He knows? Why would He do it? The answer is absolutely simple, and yet incomprehensibly profound. Why did God create? Because God is love. That's it. God is love. But the thing about love is you can't love something. Love doesn't exist in a vacuum. For love to exist, it must have an object of its affection. For God to be a God of love, He was almost compelled to create, because as a God of love, He had to be able to share His love with something in which He focused His love on. So God was moved to create because He is a God of love, and He created us for the purpose of loving us. You need to understand that love is at the very core of who God is. Anger, judgment, wrath, punishment, these are not attributes of love. They're not at the core of who God is. Those, anger, judgment, wrath, punishment, those are the result of people rejecting God's love in Christ. But grace, mercy, patience, gentleness, kindness, those are attributes that flow from the very core of God because they flow from a heart of love. God is love. And so He created the world so that we could be the focal point of His heart. And all that we see, all that is in this world, all that is even yet to be discovered and marveled at, He created for us. For the Scriptures tell us that the heavens and the earth were made for man, for us, as a home. in which we could dwell, as a place where we could know our God and live in a relationship with Him. And that brings us to the Old Testament reading this morning. And I want to tell you something. I don't think I've mentioned this to you before, but over the years, as we are together, you will hear this numerous times. I'm not bashful about talking about this. My wife is, but I'm not. Genesis 3:8 is the verse that I've chosen for my funeral text. And whoever preaches my funeral sermon better be preaching on this text. So if that happens, you're all here, you know it, make sure it happens. Genesis 3:8. God came walking in the garden in the cool of the day. It's one of those passages that when we're reading Genesis, the account of the garden, we just run right over it real quick and don't think about it. Well, what's it saying? This wasn't a surprise to Adam and Eve. This wasn't an unusual event. The text carries the emphasis that this is what God always did. That God always was coming into the garden to walk with Adam and Eve in the cool of the day. You see, God is the God of love, created the world, and He created the Garden of Eden, and He placed Adam and Eve there so we can love them. Not love them from a distance, but love them in an up-close and personal way. So the text emphasis is that every day in the cool of the day, God came into the garden. And He walked with them as if He's walking arm in arm with them, listening to them, talking with them, sharing Himself with them, loving them. And then something happened. It broke God's heart when Adam and Eve were deceived. The focal point of His heart was torn away from Him. He loved them, and now sin separated us from Him. And He's watched over the centuries and the eons of time as the ravages of sin have taken hold of the world. And in spite of all that we have done, in spite of all that we have become, He never stopped loving us. Because it is in His nature, the very core of His being, to love. And so He loves His children. And even though we became sinful and our sin separated us from Him, there was nothing He would not do for us. Even to the point of making the ultimate sacrifice, the life of His Son upon the cross. But there's a problem. God can't die. The Scriptures are clear. Only the blood of the innocent can pay for the sin of the guilty. And God was the only one who was innocent. But God can't die. So He did the unthinkable. God chose to make Himself vulnerable. Realize what that means? That the God of creation who spoke it into existence chose to make Himself mortal, make Himself vulnerable. Jesus came into this world. God can't die, but God as a human being can die. And Jesus came into the world for that purpose. Born as a human being, vulnerable and helpless, so He could give His life into death on the cross. That the innocent one could shed His blood for the guilty. And that brings us to heaven. Because God's heart and the desire of His heart has never changed. What was His original desire? To love us in an up-close and personal way. Sin separated us from God, and through Christ Jesus, God has forgiven our sins and restored us to a relationship, and His promise to us is that He will love us in an up-close and personal way. Now, heaven is described in any number of ways in the Bible. It's called a return to the Garden of Eden. It's called the abode of God's splendor, the mountain of God. It's called a wedding banquet. a marriage feast, a wedding banquet. It's, you have the images of many mansions. The city of God with streets of gold and gates of pearl. Why so many descriptions? Why didn't God just say, this is what heaven is like? I think it's because heaven is so far above and beyond anything we could ever experience in this world that we have all these different images, all these different pictures that give us different facets and nuances of how wonderful heaven's going to be. But we can never really grasp it until we're there. It's beyond anything we can ever experience in this life. But one thing we do know with absolute certainty is that when our life in this world is over and He calls us to heaven, we will walk with God. Because that was His desire. That's why He came into the garden. To walk with us, to share Himself with us, to be in a relationship of love with us. Heaven is one of those things that because we really can't understand what heaven is going to be like, we're often confused. There are those who really honestly think that heaven's going to be a boring place. I've even heard it, I may have said this to you before, I've actually had someone tell me, I don't want to go to heaven, I want to go to hell. That's where the party's going to be. We have all these misconceptions. Some people think that we're going to be mindless, faceless blobs of whatever, that we won't know each other or know anything. Nothing can be further from the truth. Here's a passage where the Apostle Paul helps us understand. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. I only know part now. When I get there, I'll know everything. Everybody enjoys a good story, don't they? I mean, why do you think the movie industry makes billions of dollars? Because we pay money to sit and watch a story unfold before us. Authors write books that the greater the story, the more copies that sell. We love a good story. Well, Hollywood has nothing on God. Do you know what's going to happen in heaven? Do you realize that you're going to know everybody instinctively? And the day will come when you stand face to face with Moses. And all those people were with Moses when he crossed the Red Sea. And you know what Moses is going to do? And all those who are with him? They're going to share their story with you. They're going to tell you what it was like to have God deliver them out of bondage and lead them through the Red Sea and defeat Pharaoh's armies and lead them to the Promised Land. They're going to share their story, and you are going to marvel at the grace of God in their lives. And through that, God is going to be glorified. You're going to meet a young man who was a shepherd boy. And you're going to know it's David. And he's going to tell you about standing against that giant Goliath. And he's going to tell you how God took him as a shepherd boy and made him the king of Israel. And he's going to reveal to you things that aren't even included in Scripture, how God did it. And God worked in his life. And you're going to marvel. And God's going to be glorified. You're going to meet people you've never heard of. They aren't recorded in Scripture. People of all the ages, and they're going to have a story to share. And you're going to hear their story, how God loved them, how God walked with them in this life, and watched over them and used them. And you're going to marvel at what God did in their lives. And God is going to be glorified. We're still, you and I, in the process of kind of getting to know each other. I haven't been that long. And I want to be honest with everyone. Life in this world is hard. And the reality is that there are circumstances out of our control. And there's every possibility that as much as I want us to be together for many years, we could end our services today and go our separate ways, and some of us would never see each other again. A car wreck, a house fire, some other unforeseen accident. Life is fragile, and things are out of our control. And while that is true, it does not lead us to despair, but it helps us to understand that God has a plan for us. And we don't have to despair about the future because God has provided a future where we are all going to be together forever. So someday, whenever that day comes, and I'm walking down those proverbial streets of gold, I'm going to come face to face with you. And I'm going to hear your story. And you're going to hear my story. And we're both going to marvel. And God's going to be glorified. Because we all have a story, don't we? I had you watch a little video clip about everyone having a story. And that's focused on life in this world, and that's true. Everyone has a story. But we come today to the end of our sermon series on Mission Possible. We know, I pray you've seen over the last 7 weeks, that God has a desire to change the story. He has a desire to intersect in people's lives and change the story, to reveal Himself to them, His love for them, and to enhance their story by loving them as His children. And we who are here together today are His people. We're His church. And He has called us to use us in this life. To be the hands and feet of Jesus that go into the world to minister and to serve. To be the voice of God that speaks a message of reconciliation and hope to those who think they're unworthy. To be those whose lives intersect the lives of other people. And allow God to use us to change their story. To enhance their story and make it more than it was. By including Himself in the story. Everyone has a story. And God will use every one of us. And when we get to heaven, we will see more clearly. We will know every time that God was present with us along the way, how He used us, how He protected us, how the word we spoke affected someone in such a way that they turned the heart to God. How the simple service we did brought glory to God and warmed someone's heart and helped them to understand that they were of value. We will see everything that God did in our lives for His glory. We will see fully and completely. So as we end our sermon series, I want you to understand, and I want you to know that you have a story. And someday, I'll get to hear your story. And I can't wait to hear your story. Because it's going to be marvelous. It's going to be wondrous because God has walked with you every moment of your life in His Word. That was His heart's desire to be. And His promise is that He will walk with you. He will walk with me until the time comes when life in this world is over for each one of us. And then we will walk together with God forever. Amen. And now may the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, keep your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus our Lord, and the life everlasting, heart and peace. Amen. This morning, as we sing our song of dedication,